Good evening. Perhaps tonight feels heavy. Perhaps fear has followed you here, whispering doubt into every quiet moment. Perhaps worry has made its home in your chest, a constant companion you never invited. Tonight, we rest together in the company of those who discovered something remarkable. Fear does not have to be the end of the story. Courage lives within you, even now, even when it feels impossible to find. Before we journey through these ancient teachings, to share what brought you here tonight, if you feel moved to do so. Through 20 stories from Buddhist monasteries and humble villages across Japan, China, Tibet, and Vietnam, we will discover that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to take one more breath, one more step, even when we are afraid. Let your breath become soft and easy now. Notice the gentle rise and fall of your chest. Let each exhale carry away whatever weight you've been holding. Tonight, you are held. Tonight, you can rest. If you're here because sleep feels elusive, because your mind won't quiet, because fears circle like birds that won't settle, these teachings have held others through similar nights. For 2,000 years, seekers have found courage through these stories, not by eliminating fear, but by understanding its true nature. Rest now. Let the stories guide you gently into peace. Let yourself be carried. The monk and the tiger. In the mountains of southern China, there lived a young monk named Hui, who was terrified of nearly everything. He jumped at sudden sounds. He avoided dark hallways. He could not sleep when the wind howled through the monastery walls. The other monks teased him gently, calling him Little Rabbit. But Hui's master, an old monk named Chen, simply watched and waited. One autumn evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of amber and violet, Master Chen called Hui to his room. The old monk sat cross-legged on a worn cushion, steam rising from a cup of tea in his weathered hands. Outside the window, pine trees swayed in the mountain breeze, their needles singing soft songs against the evening air. "Hui," Chen said, his voice quiet as falling leaves. "Tomorrow, you will go alone into the forest. You will walk the mountain path to the cave where the old tiger lives. You will sit at the mouth of that cave until dawn." Hui's face went pale as winter snow. "Master," he whispered, "that tiger has killed 3 villagers this year. I will die." "Perhaps," Chen replied, sipping his tea. "But perhaps not. That is what you must discover." Hui could not eat that night. He lay awake, listening to his own heartbeat, feeling it race like a frightened deer. When first light touched the monastery walls, he rose with limbs heavy as stone. He walked to the forest edge, each step slower than the last, until he stood before the narrow mountain path. The trees here grew thick and dark. Shadows moved between the trunks. Every sound seemed amplified in the morning stillness. A bird's cry, a branch cracking underfoot, his own ragged breathing. The path climbed steeply upward. Hui's legs trembled with each step, though whether from exertion or terror he could not say. He passed a stream where water tumbled over smooth stones, cold and clear. He paused to drink, cupping the water in shaking hands, tasting earth and sky and his own metallic fear. The path narrowed further. He could smell something musky now, animal and wild. His heart hammered against his ribs. Every part of him screamed to turn back, to run, to be anywhere but here. Then he saw it, the cave mouth opening like a dark throat in the mountainside. Fresh claw marks scored the earth near the entrance. Tufts of orange and black fur clung to low branches. This was not some distant danger. This was immediate, real. The tiger could emerge at any moment. Hui stood frozen for what felt like hours, though perhaps it was only minutes. His body wanted to flee. His mind conjured 1,000 ways to die. But something else rose within him. Not bravery exactly, more like acceptance. He was here. Running would not change what might happen. Worrying would not prevent it. He sat down at the cave entrance, crossing his legs the way he had been taught, placing his hands gently on his knees. The ground was cold. The morning air smelled of pine and damp earth and that wild animal musk that made his stomach clench. He closed his eyes. He began to breathe. In, out, just breathing. Just this moment. Nothing more. The fear did not leave. It remained, coursing through him like river current. But he stopped fighting it. He let it be there, as present as the cold ground beneath him, as real as the sound of his own breath. He noticed how fear felt in his body, the tightness in his chest, the trembling in his hands, the way his jaw clenched without his permission. He watched these sensations rise and fall, come and go, like waves on a shore. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. Birds sang in the trees. The fear remained, but it no longer consumed him. He was afraid, and he was breathing. He was afraid, and he was alive. He was afraid, and he was here. As dawn, light broke over the mountain peak, he heard movement from within the cave. Deep breathing. The scrape of claws on stone. His heart leaped, but he did not move. The tiger emerged, massive and golden in the early light, muscles rippling beneath striped fur. It looked at him with amber eyes, ancient and wild. They sat that way for a long moment, monk and tiger, both breathing, both alive, both simply present. Then the tiger turned and padded down a different trail, disappearing into the forest. Hui walked back to the monastery in the full morning sun, his legs steady now, his heart still beating but no longer racing. He found Master Chen sweeping the courtyard. The old monk looked up, a slight smile creasing his weathered face. "What did you learn?" Chen asked. Hui bowed. "I learned that I can be afraid and still sit. I can be afraid and still breathe. I can be afraid and still be here." The master nodded. "That is courage," he said. "Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to meet it, to sit with it, to discover it cannot kill you simply by existing. Now you know your own strength." This teaching reveals something we often forget. We believe courage means not feeling fear, but true courage is feeling the fear completely and choosing to be present anyway. In our own lives, we might notice how often we avoid what frightens us. When we need to have a difficult conversation with someone we love, fear whispers that it's safer to stay silent. When we consider changing careers or moving to a new city or ending a relationship that no longer serves us, fear paints catastrophic pictures of everything that could go wrong. When we lie in bed at night and our minds race with worries about money or health or the future, fear tells us these thoughts are protecting us, keeping us vigilant, preventing disaster. But what if, like Hui, we simply sat with the fear? What if we stopped trying to make it go away and instead became curious about it? What would happen if we noticed where we feel fear in our bodies and instead of tensing against it, we softened around it? Fear has a texture. It has a weight. It moves and shifts. When we actually pay attention to it, really feel it, we discover something remarkable. We discover we are larger than our fear. The fear exists, yes, but it does not consume all of who we are. We can be afraid and still breathe. We can be afraid and still choose. We can be afraid and still take the next step. Consider how this applies right now, in this very moment. Perhaps you are afraid of something specific, a medical test result, a conversation you need to have, a decision you must make. Notice that right now, in this moment, as you listen to these words, you are okay. The fear is present, but you are breathing. You are alive. This moment is bearable. Fear wants us to live in the future, in the land of what might happen. But courage brings us back to now, to this breath, to this heartbeat, to what actually is, rather than what we imagine. When we learn to meet our fear this way, to sit with it as who we sat at that cave entrance, we discover an unshakable strength we did not know we possessed. Let yourself rest now. Let your breathing flow naturally. The next story finds you in its own time. The merchant's empty hands. In the bustling city of Edo, in old Japan, there lived a merchant named Takeshi who had spent 30 years building a successful silk trading business. He owned 3 shops, employed 20 workers, and was respected throughout the merchant district. But Takeshi carried a secret burden. He lived in constant fear of losing everything. Each night he counted his money 3 times. Each morning he arrived at his shop before dawn to ensure his workers were not stealing. He kept detailed records, trusted no one completely, and could not enjoy a single meal without worrying about whether it might be his last feast before ruin. His wife, Yuki, a gentle woman with knowing eyes, watched her husband age before his time. The lines around his mouth deepened from constant worry. His shoulders curved forward as if carrying invisible stones. He slept poorly, waking several times each night to check that the doors were locked, that the money box remained secure, that disaster had not crept in while he rested. One day, a traveling Zen monk named Ryokan came through Edo, staying at a small temple near the merchant quarter. Yuki had heard this monk was known for his wisdom and his unconventional teaching methods. She invited him to dinner, hoping he might help her husband, though she did not tell Takeshi why the monk was really there. They prepared a simple meal: rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, grilled fish. Ryokan arrived at sunset, wearing worn robes and carrying only a walking stick and a small bowl. He bowed deeply to both of them, his movements slow and deliberate, as if each gesture mattered. During the meal, Takeshi could not stop talking about his business, his worries, his careful strategies for protecting his wealth. Ryokan listened in silence, eating mindfully, chewing each bite with complete attention. When Takeshi finally paused, Ryokan set down his chopsticks and smiled. The merchant had beautiful shops. The monk said, perhaps he would show them to him tomorrow. Takeshi agreed. Pleased, someone appreciated his hard work. The next morning, Ryokan arrived at the largest shop. Takeshi led him through proudly, showing bolts of silk in every color, displaying his accounting books, explaining his security measures. Ryokan nodded and smiled, touching the silk gently, but saying little. Then he did something strange. He asked Takeshi to give him everything. Not as payment, not as loan, but as gift. Simply give it all away, The monk would distribute the silks to poor families, the money to beggars, the shops to Takeshi's workers. Takeshi laughed nervously. Surely the monk was joking. But Ryokan's face remained serene, patient, waiting. The merchant's laughter died. His face flushed red. "Impossible," he said. "I have worked my entire life for this. Without it, I am nothing. I would have nothing." Ryokan bowed. "Then you have your answer," he said. "You believe you are your possessions. You believe without these things, you cease to exist. This is your deepest fear. Not loss of money, but loss of self." The monk suggested an experiment. For one day, Takeshi would act as if he had already lost everything. He would wake up, dress in simple clothes, eat simple food, work in his shop, but touch nothing as if it belonged to him. Just for one day, to see what happened. Takeshi wanted to refuse, but something in Ryokan's eyes, a depth of peace the merchant had never known, made him agree. The next morning, Takeshi put on his oldest robe. He did not count his money. He walked to his shop, but did not unlock the door. Instead, he walked through the city as if seeing it for the first time. He noticed things he had never seen before, despite passing them every day for 30 years. An old woman selling flowers, her wrinkled face breaking into a radiant smile when a child bought a single bloom. Two craftsmen arguing cheerfully over the best way to repair a roof. A stray dog sunning itself in a warm spot of light, utterly content. He felt strange, lighter somehow, without the weight of protecting everything. His shoulders relaxed. Without constantly planning and worrying, his mind grew quiet. He found himself breathing deeper, seeing clearer. The morning sun felt warm on his face. The smell of street vendors cooking food made his mouth water, not with worry about competition, but with simple appreciation. As the day progressed, something shifted inside him. He went to a tea house, sat alone with a cup of green tea, and watched the world move around him. People laughed. They struggled. They lived. None of them knew who he was or what he owned. To them, he was just another person drinking tea. And in that anonymity, in that ordinariness, he felt a strange freedom. That evening, he returned home. Yuki met him at the door, her eyes searching his face. "What happened?" she asked. Takeshi sat down slowly. "I discovered," he said, "that I am still me without any of it. I am still breathing. I am still here. The fear of losing everything has been a heavier burden than actually having nothing." Ryokan appeared at their door the next morning. Takeshi invited him in. The merchant bowed deeply. "Thank you," he said. "I understand now. I have been carrying mountains of fear, and it has crushed the life from my days." The monk smiled. "And now, Takeshi said, I will still run my business. I will still work hard. But I will not confuse what I have with who I am. I will not let fear of loss prevent me from living." Here we discover a profound truth about our deepest fears. So often, we are not actually afraid of the thing itself, but of what it means about us. We fear job loss not just because of money, but because we believe our worth comes from our work. We fear rejection not just because it's painful, but because we believe it means we are unlovable. We fear failure not just because we want success, but because we have tied our very identity to achievement. This fear runs deeper than surface worry. It touches the question of who we are. Buddhist wisdom teaches that our true nature cannot be threatened by external circumstances. Who you really are exists before your job title, beyond your relationship status, deeper than your bank account or your accomplishments. When Takeshi pretended he had lost everything, he discovered he was still completely himself, still breathing, still capable of seeing beauty, still able to taste tea and feel sunshine. The possessions and positions we cling to are not actually protecting us. They cannot give us what we truly need. Only our own presence, our own awareness, our own being provides that foundation. In modern life, this fear manifests everywhere. We check our bank accounts obsessively, not because the number changes our worth, but because we have forgotten we have worth beyond the number. We work ourselves to exhaustion, not because the work itself demands it, but because we fear that without achievement, we are nothing. We stay in relationships that hurt us or chase relationships that flee from us, not because we truly want these connections, but because we fear being alone means being worthless. But what if, like Takeshi, we experimented with letting go, not actually abandoning everything, but simply loosening our desperate grip? What if we asked ourselves, if I lost this job, this relationship, this money, this status, who would I be? The answer is beautiful and terrifying. You would be yourself, still here, still breathing, still capable of being present, of experiencing this moment, of finding peace in simplicity. The fear wants you to believe you need all these external things to survive, to matter, to be okay. But courage whispers a different truth. You are already okay. You have always been okay. The things you fear losing were never the source of your worth to begin with. Rest into that truth now. Let your body soften. Breathe gently. The student who battled fear in a small monastery in Tibet, high in the mountains, where the air was thin and the sky impossibly blue, there lived a young student named Pema. She had come to the monastery seeking peace, but instead she found herself constantly afraid of making mistakes in her practice, afraid of displeasing her teachers, afraid that she was not progressing quickly enough, that she would never understand the teachings, that she had wasted years of her life on a path she could not walk. Her teacher, an elderly nun named Tenzin, noticed Pema's struggle. The young student's face was always tight with worry. Her shoulders hunched as if expecting criticism. During meditation, she fidgeted constantly, unable to settle, her mind spinning with fearful thoughts about whether she was doing it correctly. One morning, after the other students had left the meditation hall, Tenzin asked Pema to stay. They sat together in the quiet space, light streaming through high windows, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. Pema waited for correction, for instruction, for some sign of what she had done wrong. Instead, Tenzin asked her to close her eyes and bring her attention to her fear, not to push it away or try to fix it, but simply to feel it completely. "Where do you feel the fear in your body?" the teacher asked. Pema scanned her awareness. "My chest feels tight," she said. "My throat is constricted. My stomach clenches. My hands are cold." "Good," Tenzin said. "Stay with those sensations. Don't try to change them. Just feel them fully." For long minutes, Pema sat with the physical feeling of fear in her body. At first, it was overwhelming. She wanted to open her eyes, to move, to escape. But Tenzin's steady presence beside her helped her stay. Gradually, something remarkable happened. The fear was still there, but it no longer felt so solid. It moved. It shifted. Sometimes it was intense. Sometimes it quieted. It came in waves rather than being one unrelenting force. "Now," Tenzin said, "I want you to have a conversation with your fear." This seemed strange to Pema, but she trusted her teacher. In her mind, she spoke to the fear as if it were a separate being sitting across from her. "Why are you here?" she asked. The fear responded, not in words exactly, but in knowing. "I am trying to protect you. I don't want you to be hurt. I don't want you to fail." Pema felt tears forming behind her closed eyes. "What are you afraid will happen?" she asked the fear. The fear showed her images. Herself, alone and lost. Her teachers, disappointed and dismissive. Years passing with no progress, no peace, no understanding. Herself on her deathbed, having wasted her one precious life. The images were vivid and painful. Pema wanted to push them away, to argue against them, to prove they were false. But Tenzin had told her just to listen. So she let the fear speak. She let it show her everything it had been trying to protect her from. When the images finally faded, Pema asked the fear one more question. "What do you need?" The answer came immediately. "I need you to acknowledge me. I need you to know I'm trying to help. Even if my methods hurt you, I need you to be gentle with me instead of fighting me all the time." Pema's tears fell openly now. She had spent so much energy trying to get rid of her fear, trying to be the perfect student who never felt afraid. She had been at war with this part of herself, treating it as an enemy. But it had only ever been trying to protect her. She opened her eyes. Tenzin handed her a handkerchief without comment. When Pema had wiped her face, the teacher spoke. "Fear is not your enemy. It is a part of you that learned, probably very young, that the world is dangerous and you must be vigilant. Thank that part of yourself. It has worked very hard to keep you safe. But also explain to it, gently, that you no longer need such intense protection. Tell it you can handle discomfort. Tell it failure is not death. Tell it you are stronger than it believes." Over the following weeks, Pema began a daily practice of speaking with her fear. Each morning, she would sit and feel where it lived in her body. She would thank it for trying to protect her. She would explain, as if to a worried child, that she was okay, that she could handle whatever came, that being imperfect was not dangerous. Slowly, gradually, the fear began to soften. It never completely disappeared, but it no longer ruled her. It became something she could acknowledge, thank, and then gently set aside. Months later, during a teaching session, another student asked Pema how she had become so calm, so settled in her practice. Pema smiled. "I made friends with my fear," she said. "I stopped trying to defeat it and started trying to understand it. It turned out fear was never the enemy. Fear was the part of me that most needed compassion." This story teaches us something we rarely consider. We treat fear as an invader, something foreign that has attacked us and must be expelled. But fear is actually a part of us, doing what it believes is its job, keeping us safe. Often, this fear developed when we were young. Maybe we were criticized harshly and learned that mistakes were dangerous. Maybe we experienced loss and learned that attachment leads to pain. Maybe we felt abandoned and learned that we must be perfect to be worthy of love. The fear is not trying to hurt us. It is trying to protect us using the only strategies it knows. But those strategies were developed in childhood, in circumstances that may no longer exist. The fear has not updated its information. It still believes we are small and vulnerable, and the world is overwhelmingly dangerous. Buddhist practice teaches us to meet this fear with compassion rather than combat. When we fight our fear, we are essentially fighting ourselves. We create an internal war that no one can win. But when we turn toward fear with curiosity and gentleness, when we ask it what it needs and thank it for trying to help, something profound shifts. In daily life, this might look like pausing when you feel afraid and asking, what is this fear trying to protect me from? If you are afraid to speak up in a meeting, perhaps the fear is trying to protect you from criticism. Thank it. Acknowledge that being criticized can feel painful. And then, gently, remind the fear that you can handle discomfort. You have survived criticism before. You will survive it again. If you are afraid to pursue your dreams, perhaps the fear is trying to protect you from failure and disappointment. Thank it. Acknowledge that failure does hurt. And then explain that avoiding failure means also avoiding growth, joy, and the fullness of living. This is not about getting rid of fear. This is about changing your relationship with it. Instead of seeing fear as an obstacle to overcome, see it as a part of yourself that needs understanding. Instead of shame about feeling afraid, feel compassion for the part of you that is working so hard to keep you safe. When you stop fighting and start befriending, fear loses its power to control you. It becomes simply another voice in the conversation, one you can listen to and then decide whether to follow. Breathe slowly now. Feel yourself settling. Rest. The fisherman and the storm. On the coast of Vietnam, in a small village where houses stood on stilts above the water, there lived an old fisherman named Min. He had fished these waters for 60 years, since he was a boy learning from his father. He knew every current, every reef, every season's patterns. But there was one thing that filled him with dread: storms. When Min was 12, a typhoon had struck while he and his father were out fishing. The waves rose like mountains. The wind screamed like demons. Their small boat tossed like a leaf in a waterfall. Min's father had held him close as they bailed water frantically, both of them certain they would die. By some miracle, they had made it back to shore. But Min's father developed a cough from the cold seawater that never left. 3 months later, he died. From that day forward, storms terrified Min. At the first sign of dark clouds, he would race back to shore, even if it meant losing his catch, losing a day's income, looking foolish to the other fishermen who stayed out longer. His wife, Lin, understood. She had loved his father too, but she worried that Min's fear was making him old before his time. The younger fisherman whispered that Min had lost his courage. Some days he did not go out at all if the clouds looked even slightly threatening. One summer, a wandering monk came to their village. He was not a grand teacher with a monastery and students. He was simply a man who walked from place to place, offering teachings to anyone who would listen, accepting meals in exchange for wisdom. His name was Thien, and he had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Lin invited him to share their evening meal. As they ate rice and fish stew, Min found himself talking about his fear. He had not meant to. The words simply poured out. The storm, his father's death, the way his hands shook when clouds gathered, the shame he felt at his own terror. Thien listened without judgment. nodding occasionally. When Min finished, the monk was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, "When you see storm clouds, what do you do with your breath?" Min looked confused. "My breath? I don't know. I suppose it gets quick. Shallow." Tien nodded. "And your body?" Min thought. "I tense up. My shoulders rise. My jaw clenches. Everything gets tight." The monk smiled gently. "So the storm that happened 50 years ago is still happening in your body every time you see clouds. Your breath quickens as if fighting waves. Your muscles tighten as if bracing against wind. You are living that storm over and over, every time the memory arises." Min felt something crack open in his chest. It was true. He had been reliving that terror constantly, his body unable to tell the difference between memory and current reality. Tien suggested a practice. The next time storm clouds appeared, Min should do something different. Instead of letting his breath quicken and his body tense, he should deliberately slow his breathing. He should soften his shoulders. He should speak to his body. "We are safe now. We are on shore. We are not in danger." He should separate the past from the present, the memory from the moment. A week later, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Min's immediate instinct was the familiar panic. But he remembered Tien's words. He sat down on the beach. He placed one hand on his chest, one on his belly. He began to breathe slowly. In for 4 counts. Out for 6. His body wanted to tense, but he consciously softened his shoulders, unclenched his jaw, relaxed his hands. As he breathed, he spoke quietly to himself. "I am not 12 years old. I am not in a boat. I am not fighting waves. I am here, on solid ground, breathing, safe. The storm happened. My father died. But I survived. I am alive. I am here." The panic did not disappear instantly. It rose in waves, just like the ocean itself. But each time it rose, Min returned to his breath, slow and steady. Each time his body tensed, he consciously softened. Each time the memory pulled him into the past, he gently brought himself back to the present. "I am here. I am safe. I am breathing." He sat that way until the storm clouds passed over without dropping rain. When he stood, his legs were steady. Something had shifted. The memory was still there. The sadness about his father was still there, but the overwhelming terror had loosened its grip. Over the following months, Min practiced this regularly, not just when storms threatened, but every day. He learned to recognize the first signs of fear arising in his body. The quick breath, the tight chest, and he learned to respond not by running from the fear but by breathing through it, by anchoring himself in the present moment, by reminding his nervous system that the past was not happening now. Gradually, his fear transformed. It did not vanish. He still felt a flutter of worry when storm clouds gathered, but it no longer controlled him. He could assess the actual danger rather than reacting from trauma. He could choose his actions rather than being driven by panic. One day, when a brief summer squall appeared on the horizon, Min stayed out fishing. He watched the rain approach across the water, silver sheets falling from grey clouds. He felt the wind pick up, and he breathed, slow and steady. He secured his equipment calmly. He turned his boat towards shore at a measured pace. He arrived safely, his catch intact, his mind clear. Lin greeted him at the dock with tears in her eyes. "You stayed out," she said. Min nodded. "I did. I was afraid, but I did not let the fear decide for me. That is the difference." Thean's teaching had given him something more precious than courage. It had given him the ability to be present with his fear, to separate past from present, to respond rather than react. This teaching offers profound wisdom about trauma and fear. When we experience something terrifying, our nervous system remembers. It creates a protective response, trying to ensure we never face that danger again. But sometimes this protection becomes a prison. Our bodies continue to react as if the danger is still present, even when we are actually safe. The past bleeds into the present. The memory becomes more real than the moment. Buddhist practice teaches us to return to our breath, to our body, to this moment. Not because the past did not happen, not because the pain was not real, but because living in constant fear of something that already occurred prevents us from being fully alive now. When trauma has its grip on us, our breath quickens and shallows. Our muscles tense. Our minds race to worst-case scenarios. These are survival responses, and they were useful once. But when they happen constantly, they exhaust us. They keep us trapped in a state of emergency, even when there is no current emergency. The practice Min learned is accessible to all of us. When fear arises, when your breath quickens and your body tenses, that is your cue. Pause. Place one hand on your chest. Breathe slowly. Count if it helps. 4 counts in. 6 counts out. With each exhale, consciously relax your shoulders, soften your belly, unclench your jaw, and speak gently to yourself. I am safe right now. I am here. This is not then. This is now. You are teaching your nervous system to distinguish between memory and reality. You are showing your body that it can relax, that you can handle this moment, that survival mode is not always necessary. This takes practice. The fear will not disappear after one session of slow breathing. But over time, with repetition, you retrain your automatic responses. You create new pathways in your brain. You learn that you can feel afraid and still be safe. You discover that the past, while it shaped you, does not have to control you. When you bring this quality of awareness to fear, when you breathe through it rather than running from it, you reclaim your life from the grip of old wounds. Let your breathing be gentle now. Let yourself rest in safety. This moment holds you. The scholar's question. In a monastery in the mountains of Japan, a scholar named Akira came seeking wisdom about fear. He was a man of great learning, familiar with every philosophy, every teaching, every text. But his knowledge had not freed him from constant worry. He worried about his reputation, about whether his work would endure, about criticism, about being wrong, about dying before completing his greatest work. The abbot of the monastery, an old master named Soen, agreed to meet with him. They sat in a simple room overlooking a garden where cherry trees were just beginning to bloom, their pale pink petals trembling in the spring breeze. Akira began immediately with his questions. "Master Soen," he said, "I have studied everything I can find about overcoming fear. I understand conceptually that my worries are often about things that may never happen. I know intellectually that I am attaching to outcomes I cannot control. But knowing these things has not freed me. How do I actually overcome fear?" Soen smiled. a gentle expression that softened his weathered face. He poured tea for both of them, the water streaming from the pot in a perfect arc, steam rising in delicate spirals. He set down the pot and looked directly at Akira. "You will never overcome fear," he said. Akira's face registered shock, then confusion. "But all the teachings say we can become fearless," he protested. "The Buddha was fearless. Enlightened beings have no fear." The abbot shook his head slowly. "That is a misunderstanding. Fearlessness does not mean the absence of fear. It means a different relationship with fear. It means fear arising and passing without controlling your actions. It means being intimate with fear rather than at war with it." Akira was silent, processing this. Soen continued. "You are trying to solve fear with your mind. You think if you understand it deeply enough, analyze it thoroughly enough, it will surrender and leave you in peace. But fear does not live in the intellect. It lives in the body. It lives in the nervous system. It lives in parts of you that do not respond to logic." The scholar felt something shift in his chest, a strange sensation like ice beginning to melt. "What do I do then?" he asked. And for the first time, his voice carried not confidence, but genuine vulnerability. Soen leaned forward. "Stop trying to defeat fear. Stop trying to transcend it. Instead, become curious about it. What does it feel like? Where does it live in your body? What is it trying to tell you? Fear is information. It is your system alerting you to something. Sometimes the alert is based on real danger. Sometimes it is based on old conditioning, on wounds from the past, on catastrophic thinking. Your job is not to eliminate the fear, but to listen to it wisely." Akira spent the next week at the monastery, not reading or studying but simply sitting with his fear. Soen gave him a practice. Each morning, before his mind could fill with worries, Akira would sit in meditation and ask himself, "What am I afraid of right now? In this very moment? Not tomorrow. Not next year. Right now." The first morning, his mind immediately leaped to all his future fears. His unfinished work, his reputation, his eventual death. But Soen had been clear. Only this moment. So Akira brought himself back. Right now, sitting on this cushion, in this room, with sunlight streaming through the window. What am I actually afraid of? The answer surprised him. Right now, he was not afraid of anything. He was breathing. He was warm. He was fed. He was safe. The fears were all about the future, about things that were not happening. When he stayed truly present, the fear evaporated like morning mist. But of course, his mind would not stay present. It would wander back to worries. Each time, Akira practiced returning to now. What is actually happening? What do I actually know? What is actually true in this moment? The difference became stark. In the present, he was almost always okay. In the imagined future, he was constantly in danger. By the end of the week, Akira had a profound realization. His suffering was not caused by external circumstances, but by his own mind's habit of leaving the present moment to worry about the future or ruminate about the past. The fears themselves were not the problem. The problem was believing every fear, following every fear, letting every fear dictate his emotional state. He bowed deeply to Soen. "I understand now," he said. "I cannot control whether fear arises, but I can choose whether to believe it, whether to follow it, whether to let it determine my actions. Sowen nodded. That is wisdom. Fear will come. It is part of being human, part of having a nervous system that tries to protect you. But you are not your fear. You are the awareness that notices the fear. You are the space in which fear arises and passes. When you know this, to really know it, fear becomes like a cloud passing through a vast sky. Present, but not permanent. Visible, but not substantial. Something you can observe without being controlled by it. Akira returned to his scholarly work, but with a transformed approach. When fear arose about whether his work mattered, he noticed it. "Thank you for trying to protect me," he would think. And then he would return to the work itself, finding joy in the inquiry rather than in some imagined future outcome. When worry about criticism surfaced, he acknowledged it without fighting it. Yes, criticism may come, and I will handle it when it does. Right now, I am here, writing, thinking, alive. The fears still arose, but they no longer trapped him. This teaching illuminates something crucial about how we relate to fear. We often believe we need to eliminate fear to be free. We think fearless people never feel afraid. But this is not true. Even the Buddha, after enlightenment, had a body that responded to danger. The difference is that he did not identify with the fear. He did not believe it, follow it, let it determine his choices. He saw it as a passing phenomenon, like weather in the vast sky of awareness. For most of us, fear is not the problem. Our relationship with fear is the problem. We believe our fears. We take them as truth. We let them dictate our decisions. When fear says you will fail, you cancel your plans. When fear says you are not good enough, you do not try. When fear says the future is catastrophic, you collapse into hopelessness. But what if you responded differently? What if, when fear arose, you paused and asked, "Is this actually true right now?" Not, "Is it possible?" Not, "Could it happen someday?" But is it true in this moment, right now? As you listen to these words, you are okay. Your heart is beating. Your lungs are breathing. Whatever you fear might happen in the future is not happening now. This moment is bearable. This breath is possible. When you train yourself to return again and again to the present moment, you discover that most of your suffering exists in your mind's projection of the future or replay of the past. The present moment, even when it contains difficulty, is usually manageable. You can handle now. It is the imagined future that overwhelms you. This does not mean ignoring real dangers or avoiding necessary planning. It means distinguishing between useful concern and useless worry. Useful concern takes appropriate action. You see storm clouds. You bring an umbrella. You notice financial stress. You make a budget. Useful concern is grounded in the present and leads to effective response. Useless worry spins in circles, creating suffering without creating solutions. It imagines disasters and rehearses catastrophes and keeps you trapped in anxiety without ever taking helpful action. The practice is simple, but requires consistency. Throughout your day, pause and ask, what is actually happening right now? Not what might happen. Not what you wish was happening. What is actually true in this moment? When you drop into the present, you almost always find you are okay. You may not have what you want. Things may not be how you wish they were. But you are here. You are breathing. You can handle this moment. This is the foundation of true courage. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to be present even when fear is present. Rest now, in this moment. Let yourself arrive fully here. Breathe gently. The weaver's broken loom. In a small village in Tibet, there lived a weaver named Dolma, who was known throughout the region for creating the most beautiful cloth. Her patterns were intricate, her colors vibrant, her technique flawless. People came from distant towns to purchase her work. Her skill had supported her family for 30 years, feeding her children, providing for her aging parents, giving her a sense of purpose and pride. Then one winter morning, disaster struck. An earthquake, not large enough to destroy buildings, but powerful enough to shift foundations, toppled her loom. The heavy wooden frame crashed to the floor, splintering into pieces. Dolma stood frozen, staring at the wreckage. The loom had belonged to her grandmother. It had been perfectly balanced, perfectly weighted. She did not know if it could be repaired. And even if it could, she did not know if she could afford the repairs. Fear flooded through her like ice water. Without her loom, she could not work. Without work, she could not eat, could not feed her family. She was 60 years old, too old to learn a new trade, too poor to buy a new loom. What would become of her? What would become of those who depended on her? That night, she lay awake, her mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. Poverty, begging, shame, the loss of everything she had built. By morning, she was exhausted and despairing. A monk from the local monastery, a gentle man named Tsering, visited her that afternoon. He had heard about the earthquake and come to check on the villagers. He found Dolma sitting beside the broken loom, tears streaming down her weathered face. She poured out her story. The accident, the fear, the catastrophic future she could see unfolding. Tsering listened with complete attention. When she finished, he asked her a simple question. Right now, in this moment, do you have food for today? Dolma blinked. Yes, she said. I made soup this morning. And do you have a roof over your head? Yes, Dolma replied. And are you injured? Are you in pain? No, she admitted. Then right now, Tsering said gently, you are okay. The future you fear has not happened. The catastrophe you imagine is not real. There is only this moment. And in this moment, you have what you need. Dolma wanted to argue. But what about tomorrow? Next week? Next month? The monk smiled. Tomorrow will be its own moment. It will come with its own resources, its own possibilities. Right now, you are wasting your energy suffering over things that have not occurred and may never occur. What if you used that energy differently? He proposed an experiment. For 1 hour, Dolma would set aside all thought of the future. She would focus only on what was directly in front of her. The broken loom. Could any pieces be salvaged? Could anything be done right now? In this moment, not the whole solution. Just one small step. Dolma looked at the wreckage. She began sorting through the pieces. Some were splintered beyond use, but many were intact. The main vertical posts could be saved. Much of the hardware remained functional. As she worked, her mind began to shift. Instead of feeling helpless before an overwhelming disaster, she felt engaged in a manageable task. Sort the pieces. Assess the damage. See what remains. By the end of the hour, She had a pile of usable parts and a pile of unusable ones. The task was not finished, but she had started. She had taken one step. Tsering returned the next day. "How are you?" he asked. Dolma showed him her progress. "I am still afraid," she admitted. "But I am also working. I am doing what I can do right now." "That is wisdom," the monk said. "Fear about the future is normal. But living in that fear, letting it paralyze you, that is suffering you create yourself." Over the next weeks, Dolma worked on rebuilding her loom. Her neighbors, hearing of her plight, offered help. One man who was skilled with wood helped repair the main frame. A woman donated some rope. A child brought her father's tools. The work was slow. There were setbacks. But Dolma noticed something remarkable. Each day, she woke up afraid. And each day, she chose to work anyway. The fear did not stop her. She learned to feel the fear, acknowledge it, and then ask, "What can I do right now?" 6 weeks later, the loom stood again, rebuilt and sturdy. It was not exactly as it had been. Some parts were new. Some techniques were improvised. But it worked. Dolma sat before it, running her hands over the familiar wood, feeling the balance. She wept, but this time with gratitude. The earthquake had broken her loom. Fear had told her this was the end. But by staying present, by taking one small step at a time, she had found a way through. She shared this story with her grandchildren years later. The loom still stood in her home, still creating beautiful cloth. "And what did you learn, grandmother?" her youngest granddaughter asked. Dolma smiled. "I learned that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is taking the next small step even when you are afraid. The future may bring challenges you cannot imagine, but the future has not arrived. All you ever have is this moment. All you ever need to do is what is possible right here, right now. That is enough. That has always been enough." This teaching speaks to a fear many of us carry, the fear that we cannot handle what life might bring. We look at potential future disasters and feel crushed by them before they even occur. Job loss, illness, relationship ending, financial crisis. We play out these scenarios in our minds, experiencing the pain of them over and over, even though they have not happened. This anticipatory suffering does not prepare us. It exhausts us. It makes us feel helpless before challenges that are not even present. Buddhist wisdom teaches us to distinguish between planning and worrying. Planning is useful. It acknowledges potential challenges and takes appropriate steps. You might set aside savings in case of job loss. You might maintain your health to prevent illness. You might nurture your relationships to keep them strong. This is skillful action based in the present. Worrying, by contrast, is useless. It imagines disasters and then emotionally lives through them repeatedly without taking any helpful action. It is suffering about suffering, pain about potential pain. When we stay present, when we ask ourselves what is actually needed right now, we almost always find we can take at least one small step. The step may not solve everything. It may not eliminate the challenge, but it is possible. It is doable. And doing something, even something small, changes our relationship with fear. Instead of being victims of circumstance, we become participants in our lives. In modern life, we face this constantly. Financial worries loom large. We imagine poverty, homelessness, ruin. These fears can be paralyzing. But what if, instead of living in that imagined catastrophe, you asked, what can I do right now? Can I review my budget? Can I apply for one job? Can I sell one thing I no longer need? The action might be small, but it shifts you from helplessness to agency. Health fears work the same way. We imagine terrible diagnoses, long suffering, death. These fears are natural, especially if you have experienced illness or loss. But right now, in this moment, what is actually true? Are you breathing? Can you take a walk? Can you drink water? Can you make one healthy meal? You cannot control the future. You cannot prevent all illness, but you can care for yourself now, in small, doable ways. Relationship fears similarly trap us. We imagine rejection, abandonment, loneliness. We play out painful scenarios of being unloved and unwanted. But right now, what is true? Can you call a friend? Can you express appreciation to someone you love? Can you be kind to yourself? You cannot control whether others stay or go, but you can show up with honesty and care in this moment. The practice is to return again and again to now. When fear about the future arises, to acknowledge it, thank it for trying to alert you, and then ask, what is one thing I can do right now? Not solve everything, not fix it all, just one thing, one small step. That is how you move through fear. Not by conquering it, but by acting in spite of it. Not by eliminating worry, but by choosing presence. One moment, one breath, one step. That is enough. That has always been enough. Let yourself breathe naturally now. Feel the ground beneath you. Rest in this moment. The potter's imperfect bowl. In a town in southern Japan lived a potter named Kenji, who made his living creating beautiful tea bowls for the tea ceremony. His work was technically perfect. Every curve was precise. Every glaze was flawless. Masters of tea appreciated his craftsmanship and paid well for his pieces. But Kenji carried a secret. He was terrified that someone would discover he was not as talented as they believed, that his success was mere luck, that at any moment he would be exposed as a fraud. This fear drove him to work obsessively. He would fire a kiln full of bowls and then destroy half of them because they were not absolutely perfect. A tiny bubble in the glaze, a slight asymmetry in the rim. Any flaw, no matter how small, meant the piece was worthless in his eyes. His wife, Hana, worried about him. He slept little, ate less, and grew thin from stress. When customers praised his work, he could not accept the compliment. Instead of joy, he felt only dread that the next piece would reveal his inadequacy. One day, a tea master named Rikyu, famous throughout Japan for his wisdom and discernment, visited Kenji's workshop. He wanted to commission a special set of bowls for an important ceremony. Kenji was honored, but also filled with terror. If he failed to meet Rikyu's standards, his reputation would be destroyed. He worked for months on the commission, creating dozens of bowls, but judging each one insufficient. The deadline approached. He had not delivered a single acceptable piece. The night before the bowls were due, Kenji sat in his workshop, surrounded by rejected pieces, head in his hands. He could not do it. He was not good enough. He would fail. His career would end. Everything he had built would crumble. In his despair, He swept his arm across the table, sending a nearly finished bowl flying. It hit the floor and shattered. But as it broke, something remarkable happened. The pieces fell in a pattern that was unexpectedly beautiful. The raw clay interior contrasted with the glazed exterior. The shards created an accidental composition more interesting than the perfect bowl had been. Kenji stared at the broken pieces. A memory surfaced. Years ago, as a young apprentice, he had heard about the tea ceremony concept of wabi-sabi, the appreciation of imperfection, impermanence, incompleteness. True beauty, according to this philosophy, came not from flawless technique, but from the honest marks of process, the evidence of human hands, the acceptance of natural variation. He had forgotten this. In his fear, he had tried to create inhuman perfection. He had removed all trace of himself, all evidence of the making, all qualities that made each piece unique. That night, he could not sleep. He sat with the broken bowl. He thought about his fear. Where had it come from? He traced it back. As a young man, his father had criticized his work harshly, saying he would never amount to anything. Kenji had spent his entire adult life trying to prove his father wrong, trying to create pieces so perfect that no one could find fault. But perfection was impossible, and the pursuit of it was killing him. At dawn, Kenji made a decision. He took one of the bowls he had rejected for a minor flaw, a small irregularity in the rim. Instead of destroying it, he looked at it with new eyes. The irregularity made it interesting. It gave the bowl character. It was evidence that human hands, not machines, had shaped this clay. It was beautiful precisely because it was imperfect. He delivered the bowl to Rikyu that morning, his hands shaking. "Master," he said, "I have only this one bowl. It is not perfect. If you cannot accept it, I will understand." Rikyu took the bowl in his weathered hands. He turned it slowly, examining every angle. His face was unreadable. Finally, he smiled. "This," he said, "is the most honest bowl you have ever made. I can see you in it. I can see your hands, your humanity, your truth. Perfection is cold. It has no soul. But this bowl has soul. It is alive." Kenji felt tears burning behind his eyes. "You are not disappointed?" he asked. Rikyu laughed gently. "Disappointed? I am grateful. You have given me something real, something human. That is worth infinitely more than technical perfection." In the years that followed, Kenji's work changed. He still practiced his craft with care and attention, but he stopped trying to eliminate every trace of humanity. He embraced the small variations, the evidence of process. His work became more expressive, more personal, more alive. And paradoxically, his reputation grew. People sensed the shift. His bowls now carried something they had lacked before: warmth, presence, truth. The fear of being imperfect had driven him to create cold, lifeless perfection. The acceptance of imperfection allowed him to create work that touched people's hearts. This story addresses one of the most common fears in modern life: the fear of not being good enough. This fear has many names: imposter syndrome, perfectionism, self-doubt. At its core, it is the terror that if people really knew us, really saw us, they would reject us as inadequate. So we hide. We perform. We try to present a flawless exterior, while inside we feel like frauds waiting to be exposed. This fear is exhausting. It drives us to work ourselves to burnout, trying to prove our worth through achievement. It prevents us from taking risks, trying new things, showing vulnerability. It makes us reject compliments because we believe we do not deserve them. It keeps us locked in a prison of our own making, where we can never be good enough, because good enough is an impossible standard. Buddhist teachings remind us that perfection is not the goal. Authenticity is the goal. Wabi-sabi teaches us to find beauty in imperfection, to appreciate the crack in the bowl, the wrinkle in the fabric, the asymmetry in the design. These imperfections are not flaws to be hidden. They are evidence of reality, of process, of the natural world where nothing is perfect and everything is in flux. When you fear being imperfect, you are essentially fearing being human. But humanity is all we have. We are not meant to be machines, producing identical, flawless outputs. We are meant to be messy, complicated, imperfect beings doing our best with what we know. Your value does not come from being perfect. It comes from being real. Think about the people you love most. Do you love them because they are flawless? Or do you love them because of their quirks, their vulnerabilities, their particular way of being in the world? The same is true for how others experience you. Your imperfections make you approachable, relatable, human. In work, this fear manifests as never feeling your work is good enough. You revise endlessly, never ship, never share, because you are waiting for perfection that will never come. But perfect work is dead work. It has no life in it. The work that moves people is work that carries the marks of its maker, the evidence of struggle and risk and humanity. When you let go of perfection and embrace honest effort, your work becomes powerful. In relationships, this fear makes you hide your true self. You present a curated version, the highlights reel, the best angles. But people cannot connect with perfection. They connect with truth. When you risk showing your struggles, your doubts, your imperfections, you create space for real intimacy. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the foundation of genuine connection. The practice is to catch yourself when the fear of imperfection arises and ask, what would happen if I let this be imperfect? What if I sent the email with a typo? What if I showed up to the gathering without perfect makeup? What if I shared the creative work, even though it is not polished? What if I admitted I do not know something? You will almost certainly discover that the catastrophe you feared does not happen. People respond to realness. They appreciate honesty. Your imperfection gives them permission to be imperfect too. Breathe softly now. Let yourself be exactly as you are. Rest in your own humanity. The farmer's changing seasons. In the countryside of China, there lived a farmer named Wei who had worked the same land for 40 years. He knew every inch of his fields, every quirk of the weather patterns, every secret to coaxing food from the soil. But in recent years, the climate had shifted. Rains came at unexpected times. Droughts lasted longer. The old patterns he had relied on no longer held true. Each season brought new uncertainty, and Wei found himself paralyzed by fear of what might come. He would lie awake at night, imagining disasters. What if the rains failed completely? What if floods destroyed his crops? What if he could not feed his family? What if, after a lifetime of hard work, he lost everything to forces beyond his control? The fear consumed him. It made him hesitant to plant, afraid to invest in seeds that might not grow, reluctant to try new approaches that might fail. His wife, May, watched him shrink into himself. Where once he had been confident and decisive, now he second-guessed every choice. Where once he had been engaged with his work, now he was frozen by worry. One market day, Wei met an old friend who had become a wandering teacher of Buddhist philosophy. They had grown up together in the village, but his friend, Liang, had left decades ago to study in a monastery. Now he returned occasionally, sharing what he had learned. Over tea, Wei confessed his fears. The changing weather, the uncertainty, the feeling that everything he knew was becoming useless. Liang listened, his face calm and attentive. When Wei finished, Liang asked him a question. When you plant seeds in spring, do you know for certain they will grow? Wei considered this. No, he admitted. Many things can happen. Pests, disease, bad weather. But you plant them anyway, Liang said. Yes, Wei replied. Because if I do not plant, I will definitely have no harvest. Liang smiled. So you have always lived with uncertainty. You have always taken action not knowing the outcome. What has changed is not the uncertainty itself, but your awareness of it. Wei sat with this. It was true. Farming had always been uncertain. One year might bring abundance, another scarcity. He had never been guaranteed success. But somehow, he had stopped noticing this. He had fallen into a comfortable pattern and convinced himself it was security. When the pattern broke, the underlying uncertainty became visible again, and it terrified him. Liang explained a teaching. Impermanence is the nature of all things. The weather changes. Bodies age. Empires rise and fall. Nothing remains the same. When we resist this truth, when we cling to the illusion of permanence, we suffer. But when we accept impermanence, when we make peace with constant change, we find a different kind of security. Not the false security of things staying the same, but the real security of knowing we can adapt, respond, and keep going no matter what changes. Wei wanted to believe this, but the fear still gripped him. How do I make peace with not knowing what will happen? He asked. Liang suggested a practice. Each morning, before beginning his work, Wei should spend a few moments acknowledging what he could not control. The weather, the global economy, other people's decisions. He should name these things explicitly. I cannot control the rain. I cannot control the market prices. I cannot control the insects. Then he should turn his attention to what he could control. His effort, his attention to the soil, his willingness to learn and adapt, his kindness to his family, his presence in each moment. These things he could choose. These things he could cultivate. Wei began this practice the next morning. Sitting in his field as the sun rose, he spoke aloud. I cannot control whether it will rain. I cannot control whether the harvest will be abundant. I cannot control the changing climate. As he named these things, he felt the fear rise. But then he continued, I can control whether I show up today. I can control whether I work with care. I can control whether I stay curious and try new methods. I can control whether I appreciate what I have right now. In this moment, naming what he could control shifted something inside him. He felt his hands unclench. His breath deepened. He looked at his field and saw not a source of anxiety, but an opportunity for engagement. Over the following season, Wei experimented. He tried drought-resistant crops. He adjusted planting times. Some experiments failed. Some succeeded. But he was learning. He was adapting. And most importantly, he was no longer paralyzed. The uncertainty remained. The changing climate continued. But Wei had changed his relationship with these facts. Instead of seeing uncertainty as an enemy, he saw it as the condition within which he worked. Instead of demanding guarantees, he embraced the challenge of adapting. His harvest that year was modest but sufficient. More importantly, he felt alive again, engaged, present. The fear of uncertainty had given way to acceptance of it. And within that acceptance, he found a kind of peace he had not known in years. May noticed the change. "You seem different," she said one evening. "Lighter." Wei nodded. "I learned that I was trying to control things I cannot control. And that was making me crazy. Now I focus on what is actually in my hands. The rest, I leave to the universe." This teaching speaks to a fundamental source of human suffering, our desire for control and certainty in a world that offers neither. We want to know how things will turn out. We want guarantees. We want to feel secure. But life does not work that way. Everything is in flux. Change is the only constant. Clinging to the illusion of permanence only creates suffering when that illusion inevitably shatters. Consider how this manifests in daily life. You want to know your job is secure, but companies downsize unpredictably. You want to know your relationships will last, but people change and sometimes grow apart. You want to know your health will remain stable, but bodies age and illness can strike without warning. No amount of worrying can create the certainty you crave. Buddhist wisdom teaches that peace comes not from controlling circumstances, but from accepting them. This does not mean passivity. It does not mean giving up or not trying. It means distinguishing between what you can influence and what you cannot. You cannot control the economy, but you can control your spending and saving. You cannot control whether someone loves you, but you can control whether you show up with honesty and kindness. You cannot control aging, but you can control how you care for your body and mind. This distinction is crucial. So much of our fear comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. We exhaust ourselves, pushing against forces larger than us. We create suffering by demanding the world work according to our preferences. When you focus instead on what is actually in your power, several things happen. First, you stop wasting energy on futile struggles. Second, you direct your effort toward effective action. Third, you build confidence in your ability to respond to whatever arises. You may not be able to prevent challenges, but you can handle them when they come. This is true security. Not the false promise that nothing bad will ever happen, but the real confidence that you can adapt, respond, and keep going through whatever does happen. The practice is to pause when you feel overwhelmed by uncertainty and make two lists. First, what cannot I control in this situation? Name these things explicitly. The weather, other people's opinions, the past, death, the economy, whatever applies. Just naming what is beyond your control helps you stop struggling against it. Then make the second list. What can I control? Your effort, your attitude, your next small action, your kindness, your presence. This list is usually shorter than the first, but it is infinitely more important because these are the things that actually matter and actually make a difference. When you live this way, uncertainty becomes less terrifying. It is simply the reality within which you operate. You do not need to know the outcome to take the next step. You do not need guarantees to show up with your best effort. You learn to find peace in the process rather than in the results. You discover that you are stronger and more adaptable than you realized. You become, in the deepest sense, free. Rest now in the uncertainty of this moment. Notice you are breathing. You are here. You are okay. Let yourself be held by what is. The monk who forgot his vows. In a mountain monastery in Tibet, an elderly monk named Sonam lived in deep shame and fear. 50 years earlier, when he was a young man newly ordained, he had broken one of his vows. The details of the transgression did not matter now. What mattered was that he had never told anyone. He had carried this secret for 5 decades, and the weight of it was crushing him. He feared that if anyone discovered his failure, he would be expelled from the monastery, lose his lifelong home, die in disgrace. The secret had poisoned his practice. When he sat in meditation, instead of peace, he found anxiety. When he chanted, instead of devotion, he felt like a hypocrite. When younger monks sought his guidance, he wanted to tell them he had no wisdom to offer. He was a fraud, a failure, unworthy of the robes he wore. The fear of discovery haunted him constantly. Every conversation felt dangerous. Every interaction carried the risk that somehow someone would see through him. As Sonam grew older, the burden became unbearable. He was 70 years old now. He could feel his body failing. He did not have many years left. And the thought of dying with this secret, of never finding peace, of spending his final days in this private hell, was more than he could stand. One morning, he went to the abbot, an old master named Tenzin who had been his teacher decades ago. Sonam's hands shook as he knelt before the abbot. "I must tell you something," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Something I have hidden for 50 years. Tenzin looked at him with eyes that held no judgment, only deep compassion. "Tell me," he said gently. Sonam poured out his story. The vow he had broken, the secret he had kept, the fear that had consumed his life, the shame that had prevented him from being fully present, fully honest, fully alive. Tears streamed down his weathered face as he spoke. When he finished, he bowed his head, waiting for punishment, for rejection, for the condemnation he had feared for so long. Instead, Tenzin reached out and placed a hand on Sonam's shoulder. "My friend," he said quietly, "you have already punished yourself far more than anyone else could. For 50 years, you have lived in a prison of your own making. You have denied yourself peace because you believed you did not deserve it. But tell me, who does deserve peace? The person who has never made a mistake? Such a person does not exist. We are all imperfect. We all fail. We all fall short of our ideals. That is part of being human." Sonam looked up, confused. "But I broke my vow," he said. "Yes," Tenzin replied. "And you suffered for it. You learned from it. You allowed it to humble you. These things have value, but now you have suffered enough. It is time to let it go." The old abbot explained that true practice was not about being perfect, but about being honest. Not about never falling, but about getting up again. Not about hiding our failures, but about learning from them. Sonam had spent 50 years thinking his mistake disqualified him from peace. But the mistake itself was not the problem. The secret, the shame, the fear of being known, these had been the real obstacles. Tenzin gave Sonam a new practice. Each morning, the old monk was to sit and forgive himself. Out loud. I forgive myself for being human. I forgive myself for making mistakes. I forgive myself for being imperfect. At first, saying these words felt impossible. They stuck in Sonam's throat. How could he forgive what seemed unforgivable? But Tenzin was patient. Keep saying it, he encouraged. Even if you do not believe it yet, let the words work on you. So Sonam persisted. Each morning, sitting in the early light, he spoke forgiveness to himself. Weeks passed. Slowly, something began to shift. The words started to feel less foreign. The tight knot of shame in his chest began to loosen. He realized that he had been holding himself to a standard of perfection that he would never demand of anyone else. If another monk had come to him with a similar confession, he would have offered compassion, understanding, encouragement. Why had he withheld these things from himself? One morning, several months into the practice, Sonam sat in meditation and felt something unprecedented. Peace. Real peace. Not perfect peace. Not the peace of someone who had never struggled, but the peace of someone who had struggled, failed, suffered, and chosen to forgive. The peace of someone who had finally stopped running from himself. He lived 3 more years. Those years were the most genuine of his life. He was no longer performing perfection. He was simply being human, honestly and completely. When younger monks asked him for advice, he spoke not from pretense, but from real experience, including his failures. His teachings became more powerful precisely because they came from truth rather than image. When he died, the monastery mourned, not a perfect monk, but a real one. Someone who had known suffering and found his way to peace. Someone whose humanity had been his teaching. This story addresses a painful truth. Many of us live in fear not of external dangers, but of our own secrets, our own perceived inadequacies, our own hidden shames. We believe that if people really knew us, knew our failures, knew our darkest thoughts, they would reject us. So we hide. We create a public self that seems acceptable while our private self suffers in isolation. This splitting is exhausting. It prevents intimacy. It makes every interaction feel false. We can never fully relax because we are always managing an image, always afraid of being discovered. The fear of being known, really known, keeps us trapped. We cannot accept love because we believe it is directed at the false self we present, not the real self we hide. We cannot find peace because we are constantly vigilant, constantly protecting our secrets. We live in a state of low-grade anxiety, always afraid that somehow our mask will slip and others will see the truth. But here is what we fail to understand. Everyone is hiding something. Everyone has failures they are ashamed of. Everyone has thoughts they believe make them uniquely terrible. The perfection we think others embody is an illusion. It is their mask, just as we have ours. When we risk being honest, when we risk being known, we often discover that others respond not with judgment but with relief. Your honesty gives them permission to be honest. Your vulnerability creates space for theirs. Buddhist teachings emphasize the importance of confession and forgiveness, not because some external authority demands it, but because secrecy and shame poison the mind. Bringing things into the light, acknowledging our mistakes, asking for forgiveness, whether from others or from ourselves. These practices free us from the prison of hiding. You do not have to be perfect to be worthy of love, of peace, of belonging. You only have to be real. Think about the secrets you carry, the mistakes you have never admitted, the fears that if people knew this one thing about you, they would reject you. What would happen if you spoke these things aloud, not necessarily to everyone, perhaps to a therapist, a close friend, a spiritual guide, just one person who can hold your truth with compassion? You might discover what Sonam discovered. The thing you feared was unforgivable is actually very human. The mistake that seemed to disqualify you from peace is actually an opportunity for humility and growth. The secret that felt like a burden crushing you loses its power when brought into light. This does not mean there are no consequences for our actions. It means that shame and secrecy amplify suffering far beyond what is useful or necessary. When we forgive ourselves, when we accept our humanity, when we stop demanding impossible perfection, we free energy that has been locked in self-punishment. We become able to live fully in the present rather than being haunted by the past. The practice is to speak forgiveness to yourself. Not once, but regularly. I forgive myself for being human. I forgive myself for making mistakes. I forgive myself for not knowing better at the time. You may not believe these words at first. That is okay. Let them work on you anyway. Over time, they soften the hardness you have developed toward yourself. They create space for compassion where there was only judgment. They allow you to be imperfect and still deserving of peace. Breathe gently. You are human. You are allowed to be imperfect. Rest in your own forgiveness. The traveler at the mountain pass. In ancient China, a merchant named Zhang was traveling through the mountains to reach a distant city where he hoped to sell his goods and make his fortune. The mountain pass was narrow and dangerous, with steep cliffs on one side and sheer drops on the other. Zhang had heard stories of travelers who had slipped and fallen to their deaths. With each step, fear gripped him tighter. He began to move slower and slower, his eyes fixed on the path immediately before him, his body rigid with tension. Every loose stone made his heart race. Every gust of wind made him freeze in terror. At this pace, he would never reach the city before winter snows closed the pass. But he was too afraid to move faster. Then he encountered another traveler, an old woman who seemed remarkably unburdened despite her age. She walked steadily, her face calm, seemingly unafraid of the dangerous terrain. Zhang called out to her, "Elder, how can you walk so peacefully in such a dangerous place? Are you not afraid of falling?" The old woman paused and smiled at him. "Young man," she said, "I have walked this pass many times. I know it is dangerous, but fear will not make me safer. In fact, fear makes me more likely to fall. When I am tense and rigid, I cannot respond to the mountain. When my mind is full of catastrophic thoughts, I cannot pay attention to what is actually in front of me. So I practice walking with relaxed awareness. I am alert but not anxious, present but not panicked." She explained her method. Instead of imagining all the ways she could fall, she focused completely on the step she was taking right now. One step at a time. She felt her foot connect with the ground. She noticed the texture of the path beneath her. She paid attention to her balance, making subtle adjustments as needed. She did not think about the entire journey or the dangers ahead. She thought only about this step, then the next step, then the next. Zhang listened carefully. This seemed simple, but he wondered if he could actually do it. His mind kept jumping to the worst possibilities. What if a rock gave way? What if the wind pushed him over the edge? What if? What if? What if? The old woman saw his struggle. She offered to walk with him for a while, to help him practice. Together, they moved along the mountain path. Each time Zhang's mind leaped to fear, she gently called him back. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice your next step. Breathe. You are here now. You are okay now. At first, Zhang could only stay present for a few seconds before fear pulled him back into imagined disasters. But gradually, with the old woman's patient guidance, the periods of presence grew longer. He began to notice things he had missed in his panic. The way the mountain flowers grew in impossible crevices, the patterns the wind made in the dust, the solid feel of the rock beneath his feet. After several hours of walking together, they reached a wider, safer part of the path. The old woman prepared to continue on her own way. Zhang bowed to her deeply. You have taught me something profound, he said. I came into these mountains carrying fear about the entire journey. You taught me that I only need to take one step at a time. The old woman nodded. This is true not just in the mountains, but in all of life. We create so much suffering by trying to walk the entire path in our minds before we have even taken the first step. We imagine all the obstacles, all the dangers, all the ways we might fail. This mental rehearsal of disaster does not prepare us. It exhausts us. Instead, we can simply be here, taking this step, then the next one, trusting that we have the capacity to respond to what actually arises. Zhang continued his journey with a transformed approach. When fear arose about reaching the city, about selling his goods, about the winter coming, he practiced returning to the present step. Just this. Just now. He discovered that the journey itself became less arduous when he was not carrying the weight of the entire path on each step. He arrived at the city safely, sold his goods successfully, and made his fortune. But the real treasure he brought back was not money. It was the understanding that he could face anything, one step at a time, one breath at a time, one moment at a time. This teaching addresses a very common form of fear, the overwhelming feeling that comes from looking at the entirety of a challenge rather than the single step in front of us. We do this constantly. We look at the mountain of work on our desk and feel crushed before we even begin. We look at the months of healing required after an injury or illness and feel hopeless. We look at the long years it will take to achieve a goal and feel too tired to start. This is suffering we create ourselves by trying to do everything at once in our minds. The path to handling any overwhelming challenge is the same. Break it down to the smallest possible unit. Not the whole project, just the next email. Not the entire recovery, just today's therapy session. Not the 10-year goal, just today's practice. When you focus on the single step in front of you, several things happen. First, the task becomes doable. You can send one email. You can get through one session. You can practice for 30 minutes. These things are possible. Second, you stop wasting energy on things that have not yet arrived. You cannot do tomorrow's work today. You cannot heal next month's pain right now. All you can ever actually do is what is in front of you in this moment. In modern life, We are constantly pulled into the future. Worry about upcoming deadlines. Anxiety about next week's presentation. Fear about next year's finances. All this future thinking creates a kind of temporal vertigo. We are never fully here because part of us is always trying to live ahead, trying to solve problems that have not yet arrived. But the future is not real. It is a mental construction, a story we tell ourselves. The only thing that is real, the only time in which we can actually take action, is now. When you practice returning to now, when you focus on just this step, you discover that this step is almost always manageable. You can handle now. You might not be able to handle the imagined weight of all future nows at once, but you can handle this one. The practice is beautifully simple. When you feel overwhelmed, stop. Place your attention on your breath for a few cycles. Then ask, what is the one thing I can do right now? Not the 10 things you need to do today. Not the 100 things you need to do this month. Just the one thing, right now. Do that thing with your full attention. Then ask again, what is the next one thing? This is how you climb mountains. This is how you heal from illness. This is how you build businesses, write books, raise children, navigate grief. One step, one breath, one moment. Strung together, these moments become a life. But you do not have to carry the whole life at once. You only have to carry this moment. And this moment is almost always bearable. Let yourself arrive here. Feel your body in this space. Breathe naturally. Rest in just this. The guard who faced death. In a fortress in ancient Japan, there served a samurai named Takeshi, who was known for his skill with the sword, but troubled by his deep fear of death. At night, he would lie awake, imagining all the ways he might die in battle. Struck by an arrow, cut down by an enemy blade, trampled by horses. The images played endlessly in his mind. During the day, this fear made him cautious when he should have been bold, hesitant when he needed to be decisive. His lord noticed this. He sent Takeshi to train with a Zen master who lived in a small temple near the fortress. The master, a former samurai himself who had renounced violence to pursue enlightenment, welcomed Takeshi with a slight bow. The master's name was Hakuin, and his eyes held a depth that made Takeshi feel simultaneously comforted and exposed. Hakuin asked only one question. Why are you afraid of something that has not happened and might never happen? Takeshi had no good answer. For a month, Hakuin gave Takeshi a single practice. Each morning, the samurai was to sit in meditation and vividly imagine his own death. Not avoid it, not push it away, but imagine it completely. See himself dying in battle. Feel the pain. Experience the fading of consciousness. Watch his own funeral. Observe his family grieving. Go through the entire process in excruciating detail. Takeshi was horrified. This seemed like torture, not practice. But Hakuin was insistent. You are already imagining your death every night, he said, but you are doing it with fear and resistance. I am asking you to do it with awareness and acceptance. Face what you fear most. Do not run from it. Walk directly into it. Takeshi began the practice with deep reluctance. The first morning, he sat and tried to imagine his death, but within seconds he was overwhelmed. His heart raced. His breathing became shallow. Panic gripped him. He opened his eyes and fled the meditation hall. Hakuin found him later. "Did you face your death?" the master asked. "I could not," Takeshi admitted. "The fear was too great." Hakuin nodded. "Then tomorrow you will try again. This is not about being perfect. This is about being willing." Day after day, Takeshi returned to the practice. Each day, he could stay with the image a little longer. He noticed something strange. When he stopped fighting the fear, when he allowed himself to fully imagine the thing he dreaded most, the fear began to change. It was still there, but it became less solid. He would see himself dying, and the image would be painful, but then it would pass. He would move through the death, through the funeral, through the grief of his family. And then what? Then the image would fade. He would open his eyes and find himself still alive, still breathing, still here. After a month, something shifted fundamentally. One morning, he sat and imagined his death and felt, for the first time, a strange peace. He realized that death was not actually what terrified him. What terrified him was the unknown, the loss of control, the ending of the self he thought he was. But when he sat with this, really sat with it, he began to understand something the Zen teachings had been pointing to. The self he was so afraid of losing was not as solid as he believed. It was a collection of thoughts, memories, sensations, constantly changing. If this self was already changing every moment, already dying and being reborn breath by breath, what exactly was he trying to preserve? He went to Hakuin with this realization. The master smiled. "Now you understand. You cannot lose what you never had. The fixed, permanent self you are trying to protect does not exist. There is only this moment, this breath, this awareness. Death will come eventually for this body, but the awareness that knows this moment, that is watching these thoughts, that is already here before birth and will be here after death. You are not the wave. You are the ocean." Takeshi felt something release in his chest. He returned to his duties as a samurai, but he was changed. He no longer feared death because he understood it was inevitable, and the self he thought would be lost was already impermanent. In the battles that followed, Takeshi fought with a clarity he had never known. Not because he was reckless, but because he was present. He did not hold back out of fear. He did what needed to be done with full commitment, knowing that death might come and that he could accept it when it did. Paradoxically, his acceptance of death made him more effective in life. He was no longer spending his energy trying to avoid the inevitable. He was using his energy to be fully here, fully engaged, fully alive. This teaching addresses the root fear that underlies so many other fears, the fear of death. Whether we consciously acknowledge it or not, much of our anxiety stems from the knowledge that we will die, that everyone we love will die, that everything we build will eventually crumble. This awareness sits in the background of our consciousness, coloring our experience of life. Buddhist practice does not deny death or try to make it less real. Instead, it invites us to face death directly, to contemplate our own impermanence, to make peace with the fact of our mortality. This might sound morbid, but it is actually profoundly liberating. When we accept that death is inevitable, we stop wasting energy trying to prevent it. We stop living in the false security of thinking we have endless time. We become more present because we recognize that this moment, right now, is precious precisely because it is temporary. Many spiritual traditions include meditation on death, not to create fear, but to create freedom. When you truly accept that you will die, that this body will fail, that this life will end, you become free to live fully now. You stop postponing joy. You stop holding grudges. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to start living because you realize the perfect moment is this one. In modern life, we avoid death. We hide it in hospitals. We use euphemisms. We pretend it is not real, or at least not imminent. But this avoidance creates a background anxiety. Death becomes the thing we do not speak of, the thing we cannot face, the ultimate terror. What if instead you practiced contemplating it, not dwelling on it morbidly, but acknowledging it honestly? You are going to die. Everyone you know is going to die. This is not a punishment. This is simply the nature of being alive in a body. Everything born dies. Everything that begins ends. When you stop resisting this truth, you discover a strange peace. You realize that if death is inevitable, then your job is not to prevent it, but to live well in the meantime. This shifts everything. Instead of trying to control the uncontrollable, you focus on what you can actually influence. How you treat people, how you show up in your work, whether you express love, whether you take risks, whether you live according to your values. Death, when contemplated clearly, becomes a teacher. It shows you what matters and what does not. It reveals that petty concerns are truly petty. It highlights the preciousness of connection, of presence, of this breath. The practice is to occasionally sit with your own mortality, not to create fear, but to create clarity. Ask yourself, if I were to die today, what would I regret not having done, not having said? Who would I wish I had loved more openly? What risks would I wish I had taken? Let these reflections guide how you live now. Let the knowledge of death be not a source of fear, but a source of freedom. You do not have endless time. You have this moment. How will you use it? Breathe gently into this precious, temporary moment. Feel yourself alive. Rest in the mystery. The child who walked in darkness. In a village in Tibet, there lived a young girl named Pema who was terrified of the dark. Each night when the sun set, she would cling to her mother, crying, begging to sleep with candles burning all around her. Her mother obliged at first, but as Pema grew older, this fear did not diminish. At 8 years old, she still refused to walk across a dark room, to fetch water in the evening, to be alone after sunset. The village elder, a wise woman who had practiced Buddhism for many decades, noticed Pema's struggle. One evening, she invited the girl and her mother to her home. The elder's small house sat at the edge of the village, surrounded by prayer flags that snapped and fluttered in the mountain wind. Inside, butter lamps flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The elder, whose name was Dolma, served tea and sweet bread. She asked Pema gently about her fear. The girl's answer came haltingly, through tears. I am afraid something will grab me in the dark. I am afraid I will fall. I am afraid of monsters I cannot see. Dolma nodded with understanding. She did not dismiss the fear or tell Pema it was silly. Instead, she asked a different question. When you are in the dark and you feel afraid, what do you notice happening in your body? Pema thought about this. My heart beats fast, she said. My breathing gets quick. My hands feel cold. I want to run. Good, Dolma said. These are your body's ways of trying to protect you. Your body believes there is danger. so it prepares you to escape. This is not bad. This is your body taking care of you. But sometimes, our body prepares for dangers that are not actually present. The elder proposed an experiment. With her mother's permission, Pema would spend one night at Dolma's house. During that night, they would practice being in the dark together, not avoiding it, not lighting all the lamps, but slowly, gradually, learning that the darkness itself was not dangerous. Pema's first instinct was to refuse, but something about Dolma's calm presence, the way she did not make Pema feel foolish or weak, gave the girl courage to try. That evening, after dinner, as twilight deepened into night, Dolma began to extinguish the lamps one by one. With each lamp that went out, Pema felt her fear rising. Her breath quickened. Her hands gripped the edge of the cushion she sat on. But Dolma stayed close, speaking in a soft, steady voice. "Notice your breath," she said. "Just notice it. You do not need to change it. Just feel it moving in and out." Pema tried to focus on her breathing. It was fast and shallow, but she could feel it. She was breathing. She was here. When only one lamp remained, Dolma spoke again. "Now I'm going to put out this last lamp. We will sit together in the darkness. I will be right here beside you. You can reach out and touch my hand any time you need to remember you are not alone." Pema wanted to scream no, but she did not. She nodded, her whole body tense. Dolma extinguished the final flame. Darkness folded around them. Pema's fear exploded. She gasped. Her heart hammered. But Dolma's voice came through the darkness, steady and warm. "I am here. You are safe. Notice your breathing. Notice what you hear." "What do you hear?" Pema, through her panic, Pema listened. She heard the wind outside. She heard the prayer flags flapping. She heard Dolma's breathing, slow and even. She heard her own heartbeat. She heard the house settling, small creaks and sighs. Nothing grabbed her. Nothing hurt her. The darkness was just dark. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Pema's breathing began to slow. The panic began to ease. She was still afraid, but she was also still here. Still breathing. Still safe. Dolma guided her through a simple practice. With each exhale, Pema would say silently to herself, "I am safe." With each inhale, she would notice something in her environment, the feel of the cushion beneath her, the sound of the wind, the scent of the butter lamps, now extinguished but still carrying a faint, waxy smell. This practice kept her anchored in the present moment rather than lost in fearful imaginings. Gradually, over the course of that night, Pema learned something profound. The darkness was not the enemy. Her own mind, spinning stories of danger, was creating the terror. They spent several nights practicing together. Each night, Pema could sit in the dark a little longer, with a little less fear. Dolma taught her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to be afraid and stay present anyway. She taught her to talk to her fear as if it were a frightened child inside her. "Thank you for trying to protect me," Pema would say to her fear. "I know you think there is danger, but I am okay. We are safe." By the end of a month, Pema could walk across a dark room without terror. She could fetch water in the evening. She still felt a flutter of nervousness when darkness fell, but it no longer controlled her. She had learned to be with her fear rather than be ruled by it. This teaching speaks to how we can work with fear that feels irrational, that we know intellectually is unfounded, but emotionally feels overwhelming. Many of us carry fears like this. Fear of flying, even though statistically it is very safe. Fear of social situations, even though most people are kind. Fear of trying new things, even though failure is not dangerous. These fears do not respond to logic because they do not live in the logical part of our brain. They live in the primitive part that responds to perceived threats with fight, flight, or freeze. Buddhist practice teaches us that we cannot think our way out of these fears. We have to feel our way through them. This means gently exposing ourselves to the thing we fear, in small doses, while practicing staying present and grounded. This is not about forcing yourself to do the thing that terrifies you all at once. That would be re-traumatizing. This is about gradual exposure, about learning that you can handle small amounts of discomfort and then slightly larger amounts, building your confidence bit by bit. The key is to pair the exposure with practices that keep you grounded. Focus on your breath. Notice your environment through your senses. Talk gently to the frightened part of yourself. Remind yourself that you are safe right now, in this moment. This works because you are literally retraining your nervous system. Your body has learned that darkness, or flying, or social situations, or whatever you fear, equals danger. You have to teach your body a new lesson. This is actually safe. I can handle this. I am okay. This learning happens through experience, not through thinking. When you repeatedly experience being afraid and nothing bad happening, your nervous system begins to update its threat assessment. Over time, the automatic fear response weakens. In daily life, this might mean if you fear social situations, you start by saying hello to one stranger. Just one. Notice your fear. Thank it for trying to protect you, and stay present through the brief interaction. Then do it again tomorrow. Build gradually. If you fear failure, you might start by doing something small where failure is possible but not catastrophic. Enter a local contest. Share a creative project with one friend. Let yourself experience failing safely. Notice that you survive it. You handle it. The catastrophe your fear predicted does not occur. This practice requires gentleness with yourself. You are working with very old, very deep protective mechanisms. They developed for good reasons, even if those reasons no longer apply. Treat yourself with compassion as you work with these fears. Celebrate small victories. Recognize courage not as the absence of fear, but as moving forward even when you are afraid. Each time you feel the fear and do the thing anyway, you become stronger. You prove to yourself that you are more capable than your fear wants you to believe. Let your breath be soft now. Feel yourself held in this moment. Rest in your own capacity to be with whatever arises. The hermit and the mirror. High in the mountains of China, a hermit monk named Lin had retreated from the world to practice meditation. He had spent 20 years in solitude, seeking enlightenment, trying to purify his mind of all negative emotions. But there was one emotion he could not overcome, no matter how many hours he sat in meditation: fear. Specifically, the fear that he was wasting his life, that his practice was leading nowhere, that he would die having achieved nothing. This fear tormented him. It would arise during meditation, disrupting his concentration. It would wake him in the night, his heart pounding. It colored everything he did with a sense of urgency and desperation. He tried to meditate it away. He tried to ignore it. He tried to push harder in his practice. Nothing worked. The fear remained, a constant companion, a voice whispering that his entire life was a mistake. One day, a wandering teacher passed by Lin's cave. The teacher was very old, his face deeply lined, his body bent with age, but his eyes were clear and peaceful. Lin, desperate for help, invited the teacher in and poured out his struggle. 20 years I have practiced, Lin said, and I cannot overcome this fear. I have failed. The old teacher listened silently. When Lin finished, the teacher asked to see Lin's meditation cushion. Lin brought it, confused about what this had to do with anything. The teacher placed the cushion in the center of the cave and asked Lin to sit on it. Then the teacher produced a small mirror from his bag and placed it on the ground in front of Lin. Look into the mirror, he said. Tell me what you see. Lin looked down. He saw his own face reflected back, weathered by years of mountain living, creased with worry. I see myself, Lin said. Look deeper, the teacher instructed. What else do you see? Lin stared into his own eyes. He saw the fear there, visible in the tightness around his mouth, the tension in his brow. I see my fear, he admitted. Now, the teacher said, I want you to talk to the face in the mirror. Talk to your fear as if it is a separate being. Ask it what it wants. This seemed strange to Lin, but he was willing to try anything. He leaned closer to the mirror. What do you want? He asked, his reflected face. The answer came not in words, but in a feeling, a knowing that arose from deep within. The fear wanted him to be enough. It wanted him to achieve enlightenment so he could finally rest, to finally feel worthy, finally feel that his existence mattered. The teacher watched Lin's face change as understanding dawned. Your fear, the old man said softly, is not your enemy. It is the part of you that is trying so hard to make you acceptable, to make you worthy, to prove that you matter. It is driving you toward enlightenment, not because enlightenment is your true goal, but because you believe only enlightenment will make you enough. Lin felt tears burning behind his eyes. It was true. All his practice had been fueled not by genuine aspiration but by fear of being worthless. He had been running from inadequacy, not running toward truth. The teacher asked Lin another question. If you never achieved enlightenment, if you sat in this cave for another 20 years and accomplished nothing, would you still be worthy of existence? Would you still deserve to breathe, to eat, to watch the sunrise? Lin wanted to say yes, but the honest answer rose up from his depths. No, I would be a failure, a waste. The teacher nodded sadly. Then you see your problem. You are making your worth conditional. You are saying I am only valuable if I achieve this thing. I am only acceptable if I become that. This is the root of your fear. Not that you will not achieve enlightenment, but that without it, you are nothing. For several days, the teacher stayed with Lin, guiding him through a different kind of practice. Instead of striving for enlightenment, Lin was to practice simply being, not being anything in particular, not being enlightened or unenlightened, just being alive. In this moment, breathing, existing. At first, this felt unbearable. Without a goal to strive toward, Lin felt lost. But gradually, he began to notice something. Moments of genuine peace arose, not when he was trying hard to meditate correctly, but when he stopped trying altogether. When he simply sat and watched the clouds pass across the sky, when he felt the sun warm his face, when he listened to the wind move through the pines. One morning, Lin woke before dawn. He sat outside his cave as the sky slowly lightened. He was not meditating in any formal sense. He was just sitting, just being present, just alive. And in that moment, fear was absent. Not because he had defeated it, not because he had achieved some great realization, but because in that moment, there was nothing to prove, nothing to achieve, nowhere to get to. He was simply here, complete, enough. The teacher found him there, smiling softly. "You understand now," he said. It was not a question. Lin nodded. "I have been afraid that without achievement, I am worthless. But worthiness is not something I need to earn. I am alive. That itself is enough." "The fear will still come," the teacher said. "This is not a permanent cure. But now you know how to meet it. When it arises, you can ask it what it needs, and you can remind it gently that you are already enough, exactly as you are." Lin lived many more years in his mountain cave, continuing his practice. But it was transformed. He no longer meditated from fear, but from genuine curiosity and appreciation. The peace he had sought so desperately finally came, but only when he stopped demanding it. This teaching addresses a modern epidemic, the feeling that we are not enough, that our worth depends on our achievements, that we must constantly prove ourselves to deserve existence. This fear drives so much of our striving, our workaholism, our perfectionism, our constant self-improvement. We are running from the terror of being worthless, of being unacceptable, of not mattering. Buddhism teaches that your fundamental worth is not conditional. You do not have to achieve enlightenment to deserve peace. You do not have to be successful to deserve happiness. You do not have to be perfect to deserve love. Your existence itself is valuable. You are here. You are alive. That is enough. This is extraordinarily difficult to accept in a culture that constantly tells us we are not enough, not thin enough, not successful enough, not accomplished enough, not productive enough. We internalize these messages and turn them into weapons we use against ourselves. We create an impossible standard and then torment ourselves for failing to meet it. The fear that arises from this is the fear that without achievement, without perfection, without constant improvement, we are worthless. But consider this. A newborn baby has achieved nothing, has no skills, produces nothing of value. And yet we recognize that baby as precious, as worthy of care and protection. What changed as you grew? When did your worth become conditional? The truth is, it did not, except in your own mind. You learned to tie your value to your performance. But you can unlearn this. The practice is to notice when you are making your worth conditional. When you think, "I will be happy when I achieve this. I will be acceptable when I look like this. I will deserve rest when I finish this." These thoughts reveal the fear beneath, the belief that right now, as you are not enough. When you catch these thoughts, pause. Ask yourself, is my existence itself not valuable? Do I need to earn the right to breathe, to exist, to take up space? The answer is no. You are enough. Right now. Not because you have done anything to earn it, but because your being itself has worth. This does not mean you stop growing or striving or improving. It means you do those things from a place of fullness rather than emptiness. You improve because it is interesting or joyful or meaningful, not because without improvement you are worthless. You work because it is satisfying to create and contribute, not because without work you deserve to suffer. This shift in motivation changes everything. Work becomes play. Striving becomes exploration. Achievement becomes a bonus rather than a requirement. Rest now in your own enoughness. You do not need to prove anything. You are already worthy. Breathe into that truth. The village of ghosts. In a remote valley in Vietnam, there was a village that had suffered greatly. War had swept through. Many had died. The survivors carried deep wounds, both visible and invisible. Among them was a woman named Lin, whose husband and 2 children had been killed. She survived, but she could not escape the memories. Every night, the ghosts of her loved ones visited her dreams. Every day, the fear of losing more, of feeling more pain, paralyzed her. She withdrew from life. She spoke to no one. She tended her small garden mechanically but took no pleasure in it. She ate because her body demanded it, but tasted nothing. She was alive, but not living, trapped between the past she could not release and a future she could not imagine without terror. The village Buddhist monk, a gentle man named Tian, noticed her suffering. He had lost family too. Everyone in the village had lost someone, but he saw that Lin was drowning in a way others were not. One evening, he visited her small house. She did not want him there, but she was too tired to send him away. He sat with her in silence for a long time, just breathing, just being present. Finally, he spoke. "Your fear is that you will be hurt again," he said, "that you will love again and lose again." Lin nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I cannot survive more loss," she whispered. "I am broken. I have nothing left." Tian did not argue. He simply asked her a question. "Can you breathe?" She looked at him, confused. "Can I breathe? Of course I can breathe." "Then you are not broken," he said gently. "You are wounded. Yes. You are in pain. Yes. But you are still here. Still breathing. Still alive. That means you are capable of more than you believe." He explained a teaching. Pain is inevitable when we love. Loss is inevitable when we attach. But suffering, the deep suffering that traps us, comes not from the pain itself, but from our relationship with it. We can experience pain and let it move through us like weather. Or we can grasp it, replay it, make it into our identity, build our lives around protecting ourselves from ever feeling it again. This second path creates more suffering than the original wound. Lin shook her head. "You do not understand. The pain is too great. I cannot let it move through. I will drown in it." Tian asked her to try something. Just for 1 hour. He wanted her to let herself feel the pain completely, not push it away, not distract herself, but also not wallow in it or make it into a story. Just feel it purely, as sensation in her body. "Where do you feel it?" he asked. Lin closed her eyes. "My chest feels crushed. My throat feels tight. My stomach churns. There is pressure behind my eyes." "Good," Tian said. "Stay with those sensations. Breathe into them. Do not try to change them. Just let them be there. For several minutes, Lin sat with the physical sensations of her grief and fear. It was overwhelming at first. She wanted to run from it. But Thien's steady presence helped her stay. Gradually, she noticed something surprising. The sensations were not constant. They moved. They intensified and then eased. They came in waves rather than being one solid mass. The pain was still there, but it was not as solid as she had believed. After the hour ended, Tien asked how she felt. Lin was surprised to find she felt lighter, not happy, not healed, but less trapped. The pain is still there, she said, but it feels different somehow. More like something passing through me rather than something I am. Over the following months, Tien worked with Lin regularly. He taught her to distinguish between the original pain of her loss and the additional suffering she created by fearing future pain. The memories of her family still brought sadness. This was natural. This was love. But the fear that paralyzed her, the terror of being hurt again, this was something she could work with. Each time the fear arose, she practiced the same process. Feel it as sensation in the body. Notice it is not constant. Breathe with it. Let it move through rather than resisting it or identifying with it. Lin began to return to life slowly. She started talking to neighbors again. She shared meals. She even, tentatively, began to care about the village children, though this brought waves of fear. What if something happened to them? What if she cared and lost again? But she practiced meeting the fear with awareness. I am afraid, she would acknowledge, and I will care anyway. Fear does not have to stop me. Years later, Lin became one of the village's most compassionate caregivers. She tended the sick. She comforted the dying. She held the grieving. People wondered how someone who had suffered so much could be so present with others' pain. The secret was that she had learned pain was not her enemy. Fear was not her master. She could hold both and still choose love. This teaching speaks to perhaps the deepest fear many of us carry, the fear of being hurt again. If you have experienced trauma, loss, betrayal, or deep pain, your nervous system learns to protect you by shutting down, by withdrawing, by building walls. The logic is simple. If I do not let anyone close, I cannot be hurt. If I do not care, I cannot lose. If I do not try, I cannot fail. This is the fear that keeps us isolated even when we long for connection. That keeps us stuck even when we dream of change. That makes us choose numbness over the risk of feeling. But here is what this fear does not tell you. Protecting yourself from pain also protects you from joy. Avoiding vulnerability also avoids intimacy. Building walls to keep hurt out also keeps love out. The life you create from fear is a small life. A safe life, perhaps, but not a full life. Buddhist wisdom teaches that pain is part of living. If you have a heart, it will be broken. If you love, you will lose. If you try, you will sometimes fail. These things are not tragedies. They are the price of being fully alive. The tragedy is not that we feel pain. The tragedy is that we let fear of pain prevent us from living. The practice is to distinguish between pain and suffering. Pain is the feeling itself, the sadness of loss, the ache of disappointment, the sting of rejection. This pain is natural and healthy. It passes through if we let it. Suffering is what we add to pain. The story about why this should not have happened, the fear that we will never recover, the belief that this pain defines us, the vow to never open ourselves to pain again. This suffering is optional. When pain arises, practice feeling it without the story. Notice where it lives in your body. Breathe with it. Name it. This is grief. This is fear. This is disappointment. Let it be there without fighting it and without making it into your identity. You are not your pain. You are the awareness that can hold pain and also hold joy and also hold peace. This does not mean seeking out pain or staying in situations that harm you. It means recognizing that trying to live without ever feeling pain is impossible, and the attempt creates more suffering than the pain itself. When you stop running from potential pain, when you accept that hurt is part of loving and living, you become free to engage fully with life. You can love knowing you might lose. You can try knowing you might fail. You can open knowing you might be disappointed. The possibility of pain does not prevent you from living. You carry the certainty that whatever comes, you can handle it. You have survived everything that has happened to you so far. You will survive what comes next too. Breathe gently now. Feel your capacity to hold both pain and peace. Rest in your resilience. The teacher's last lesson, in a monastery in the mountains of Japan, the master teacher Joshu was dying. He was 90 years old, had taught for 60 years, and had guided hundreds of students toward enlightenment. Now his body was failing. He could barely walk. His breathing labored. His students gathered around him, grieving, fearing his death. But Joshu seemed utterly at peace. One of his closest students, a monk named Kenji, asked him, "Master, are you not afraid to die?" Joshu smiled, an expression that lit his weathered face. "Why would I fear what is completely natural?" he asked. Kenji persisted, "But you are leaving us. You are leaving this life. Everything you have built will be gone. Does that not frighten you?" The old master considered this. He asked for water. After drinking slowly, savoring each sip, he spoke, "I have spent my entire life teaching about impermanence, that all things arise and pass away, that nothing lasts. That change is the nature of reality. If I fear death now, I am proving I did not truly understand my own teachings. Death is simply the final demonstration of what I have been saying all along." He explained further. "Every moment," he said, "we are dying and being reborn. The person I was this morning is not the person I am now. Cells have died. Thoughts have changed. Every breath releases the old and takes in the new. We have been practicing death our whole lives. This final death is just more obvious, more complete. But it is not different in kind from what has been happening all along." Kenji struggled to accept this. "But Master, we will miss you. The monastery will not be the same. How can that not be painful?" Joshu reached out and touched Kenji's hand. "Of course you will grieve. Of course you will miss this form, this voice, these specific interactions. That is love. Grief is simply love with nowhere to go. But I am not asking you to not grieve. I am asking you to not be destroyed by it, to not let fear of loss prevent you from loving fully in the first place." The old teacher shared a story. When he was young, he had avoided getting close to his own master because he knew the man would eventually die. He had tried to protect himself from future pain by maintaining distance. But his master had noticed and confronted him. "You are already suffering," the master had said. "You are suffering now, anticipating future suffering. You are experiencing loss before there is even loss. What sense does this make?" That teaching had transformed Joshu. He realized that trying to protect himself from pain was causing immediate suffering and preventing him from receiving the love and wisdom his teacher offered. So he opened himself completely. He loved his master deeply, spent every possible moment learning from him. And yes, when the master died, Joshu grieved terribly. But he had no regrets. The pain of loss was worth the richness of connection. He would choose that again and again. Now, facing his own death, Joshu wanted his students to understand the same truth. "Love me while I am here," he said. "Grieve me when I am gone. But do not let fear of my death prevent you from opening your hearts fully now. Do not waste these final moments protecting yourselves from future pain." In his last days, Joshu taught not through words but through his manner of being. He met each moment with full presence. When pain came, he acknowledged it without complaint. When students visited, he gave them his complete attention. When he was too tired to speak, he simply breathed, modeling peaceful acceptance. On his final morning, surrounded by his students, he opened his eyes one last time. "Death is not the enemy," he whispered. "Fear is the enemy. Resistance is the enemy. When we accept what is, we are free." Then he closed his eyes and, with a final gentle exhale, he died. The students grieved deeply. The monastery felt empty without his presence. But they noticed something. Their grief, while painful, was not destructive. They had loved him fully. He had loved them fully. There was sadness but no regret. No unfinished business. No words left unsaid. And in that completeness, there was a strange peace. They realized this was Joshu's final teaching. Live fully. Love completely. Accept impermanence. When you do this, even death cannot diminish the value of what you have shared. This teaching brings us to the ultimate acceptance, the acceptance of our own mortality and the mortality of everyone and everything we love. This is the fear beneath all fears. We are afraid of losing our jobs because ultimately we fear death, the ending of all we know. We are afraid of rejection because we fear the death of connection. We are afraid of failure because we fear the death of our dreams. Buddhist teachings do not offer us immortality. They offer us something better, the ability to live fully and love completely even knowing everything is temporary. When you truly accept impermanence, when you really internalize that this moment is precious precisely because it will not last, your life transforms. You stop postponing joy. You stop holding grudges that waste the limited time you have. You stop taking people for granted. You tell people you love them. You take the trip. You risk the creative project. You have the difficult conversation. Not because you are guaranteed success or happiness, but because this moment, right now, is all you ever actually have. The fear of loss often prevents us from fully engaging with what we have. We hold back in relationships to protect ourselves. We do not fully commit to dreams because they might not work out. We keep people at arm's length because getting close means eventually saying goodbye. But this protection is an illusion. You will lose everything eventually. Everyone you love will die, or you will die first. This is not pessimism. This is reality. The question is not whether you will experience loss. The question is whether you will let fear of loss prevent you from loving deeply in the meantime. The practice is to remember impermanence, not as something depressing, but as something that makes each moment sacred. When you hug someone you love, remember this might be the last time. Not to create fear, but to create presence. Really feel the hug. Really be there. When you eat a meal, remember that this specific meal will never come again. Taste it fully. When you watch a sunset, remember that you have only limited sunsets left in your life. Let this awareness heighten your appreciation, not dampen it. This is how you overcome the fear of death and loss. Not by pretending they are not real, but by letting them teach you to be fully alive now. When you accept that everything ends, you become free to be completely present for everything that is. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and recognize this moment is already perfect in its imperfection. You stop rehearsing future loss and instead fully experience current connection. This is the courage to live fully, accepting impermanence and loving anyway, knowing that loss will come and choosing connection nonetheless. Breathe deeply. You are alive now. This moment is yours. Rest in its preciousness. The weaver's steady hands. In a town in China, there lived a weaver named Chen who created the finest silk cloth in the entire province. Her hands were remarkably steady. Even in her 70s, she could thread the most delicate needles, create the most intricate patterns, maintain perfect tension on her loom. People asked her secret. How do you keep your hands so steady despite your age? Chen would smile mysteriously. I will tell you, she said. But first you must understand, it is not about my hands. A young apprentice named Mei came to study with Chen, eager to learn the technical skills of weaving. But Chen began the apprenticeship with something unexpected. For the first month, Mei was not allowed to touch the loom at all. Instead, Chen taught her to sit in meditation. Every morning, before the sun rose, the two women would sit together in silence. Mei was frustrated. I came to learn weaving, she protested. Not meditation. Chen replied simply, the meditation is the weaving. You will understand. During these meditation sessions, Chen taught Mei to notice fear when it arose. Fear about the future, worry about making mistakes, anxiety about being good enough. Chen explained that these fears created tension in the body. When you are afraid, your muscles tighten, your breath becomes shallow, your movements become jerky and uncontrolled. The fear travels from your mind into your hands, making them tremble, making your work imprecise. Mei began to notice this was true. When she was worried about something, her whole body felt tight. Chen taught her a practice. When fear arose, instead of fighting it or following it, simply notice it. Name it. There is fear about failing. There is worry about the future. And then consciously relax. Soften the shoulders. Unclench the jaw. Take 3 slow breaths. Return attention to the present moment, to the task at hand. Over and over. This practice. Notice the fear. Soften around it. Return to now. After a month of this practice, Chen finally allowed Mei to begin weaving. The young woman approached the loom with nervousness. What if she made mistakes? What if she disappointed her teacher, but she remembered the practice? She noticed the fear. She softened. She breathed. She brought her attention to just this moment, just this thread, just this movement. Her first attempts were clumsy. Her tension showed in uneven stitches. But each time fear arose, she practiced. Notice, soften, return. Gradually, her work improved. Not because her technical skill increased dramatically, but because she learned to work without the interference of fear. When her hands were relaxed, they could move with precision. When her mind was present rather than worried, she could see what needed to be done. The fear still arose. She still felt nervous about making mistakes, but the fear no longer controlled her hands. Years passed. May became a skilled weaver in her own right. One day, she was working on a particularly complex pattern for an important client. The work was challenging. One mistake could ruin hours of labor. She felt fear rising, the old familiar tension beginning to creep into her shoulders. But she paused. She placed her hands in her lap. She closed her eyes and took 3 slow breaths. She noticed the fear. What if I fail? What if I disappoint the client? What if all this work is wasted? She named each fear without judgment. And then she made a conscious choice. She softened her shoulders, unclenched her jaw, returned her attention to her hands, her breath, the thread in front of her. When she opened her eyes and returned to work, her hands were steady. The pattern flowed from her fingers with precision and grace. She completed the piece beautifully. Later, reflecting on the experience, she understood what Chen had been teaching all those years ago. Steady hands came not from eliminating fear, but from not letting fear create tension in the body. The fear could be there, but through awareness and practice, she could choose not to let it tighten her muscles, not to let it steal her breath, not to let it interfere with her work. This teaching reveals a practical truth about fear and performance. Whether you are weaving silk, giving a presentation, having a difficult conversation, or doing surgery, fear creates physical tension that interferes with your ability to perform well. Your hands shake, your voice trembles, your mind goes blank. You make mistakes you would not make if you were calm. This is not because you lack skill. This is because fear has hijacked your nervous system. The good news is that you can intervene in this process. You cannot always control whether fear arises, but you can control what you do with your body when fear is present. The practice is to create a routine for when you notice fear affecting your performance. First, pause, if possible. Even a 5-second pause can help. Second, take 3 slow, deep breaths. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the fight or flight response. Third, consciously scan your body and release unnecessary tension. Drop your shoulders, soften your belly, unclench your jaw. These actions send a signal to your brain that you are safe, which begins to calm the fear response. In modern life, we encounter performance anxiety constantly. Before presentations, during job interviews, in difficult conversations. When creating something, we will share. The fear is natural. Your brain perceives these situations as threats to your social standing, which in our evolutionary past was a threat to survival. But you can work with this fear rather than being controlled by it. When you notice your hands shaking as you prepare to speak, pause, breathe, soften. When you feel your throat tightening before a difficult conversation, notice it. Name it silently. Fear is here. Then consciously relax your throat. Take a slow breath. This does not make the fear disappear, but it prevents the fear from cascading into full panic. It keeps you functional even while afraid. Over time, with practice, you build confidence that you can handle feeling afraid. You prove to yourself that fear does not have to sabotage your performance. You can be nervous and still do good work. You can feel anxious and still show up. This transforms your relationship with performance situations. They stop being something you dread and avoid. They become simply moments that require you to manage fear skillfully, which you know how to do. Rest now. Feel your body. Notice where you are holding tension. Gently let it go. Breathe. The closing words. Tonight, we have journeyed together through 20 stories of courage in the face of fear. We have walked with monks who sat at the cave of tigers, with merchants who discovered their worth beyond possessions, with students who learned to befriend their fear, with weavers and farmers and warriors and teachers. We have learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to breathe, to stay present, to take one more step even when we are afraid. As you drift into sleep now, let these teachings settle into your heart. You do not need to remember every story. You do not need to memorize every lesson. Simply let the essence of what we explored tonight work on you as you rest. The wisdom is already within you. These stories simply reminded you of what you have always known. Before you slip into dreams, take 3 slow breaths. With each breath, say thank you silently. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this rest. Thank you for this moment of peace. Thank you for your own courage, which brought you here tonight, which allows you to face each day despite its challenges. If these stories brought you comfort, if this time brought you peace, please consider subscribing to this channel so that more nights like this one can find you when you need them. Your support helps others discover these teachings too. Sleep deeply now. Wake gently when morning comes. May you face tomorrow with the quiet courage of those who know that fear is simply part of being alive, and being alive is precious. May you remember that you can be afraid and still breathe. You can be uncertain and still move forward. You can be imperfect and still be enough. You are held by something larger than yourself. You are part of the great mystery of existence. Rest in that now. Rest well. Good night.